Where would you say Belhus Chase stands in 2008?
Very near the top of the tree now. If you'd asked me that a few years ago, I'd have said at the roots, about to grow and develop, but we haven't yet made it, but we're very close to it. Can I tell you about data? Because data is one thing that people always think about when they're thinking about school successes. It's only part of the story, but it clearly is an important part of the story. Our data this year will put us the third most successful school in Thurrock. And if I go through that briefly, 5 A to C's always used to be the measure of a school's success. When I became the head here 4 years ago, it was 28% 5 A to C's, and then we got 41, and then 46, and this year we're looking at either 74, 75 or 76%. We don't know yet because it depends on the roll number, but it's going to be, let's say, for argument's sake, 75% 5 A to C's. Only 2 schools in Thurrock can beat us on that. And then look at another measure, one which has become quite a high profile measure recently, and that's the 5 A to C's including English and Maths. Go back 4 years, it was 15%. This year, it's 28%. Next year, we will have beaten, we estimate, the national challenge of 30%. It's not always easy because if I give you an example, it's not so much where you finish, it's where you start and then where you finish that matters. You have to take into consideration that if we're having students who are starting from a little bit further back than other schools, perhaps who've got more of a grammar intake, it's harder for us to make such a big jump in progress. However, there is a measure that actually measures how well you have done with all your students, wherever they started. And that measure is called CVA. It stands for Contextual Value Added. Now, compare the school's CVAs and then you've got a real comparison about the school's success. Our CVA this year for Key Stage 2, which is when they start at the age of 11, going up to the day they leave at the end of Key Stage 4, should be 1,000 if we are making average progress. We estimate this year it will be a minimum of 1,036. Now, what that means is, let's say there's a realistic expectation it could be over 1040, which is extraordinarily high. It will put us, this data will put us in the top 5% of performing schools in the country, possibly the top 2 or 3%, and that is the real measure of the school success. So you asked me, where are we in 2008? I would say in the top 3% of schools in comparison to all schools in the UK.
A couple of weeks ago I was interviewing Robert McCulloch-Graham down at a seminar, and he actually made a reference to Belhus Chase to me. I was interviewing him. He said, have you been to Belhus? I said, yes, I have, several times. He said he was impressed by the focus in the school. It's a great compliment, isn't it?
You don't manage school progress, you don't manage school improvement or transformation that we have managed unless you really have a key focus, and that focus needs to be on the strategic planning around and about the school. It's how you interact with the community. It's down to the minutiae, the data. Each pupil must have a good level of data that can be dealt with by classroom teachers, that parents understand, because unless you know what we are dealing with, unless one understands the exact situation, you cannot move it forward, you cannot calculate it. This time next year we're going to be here, because if you don't know where you're starting, you've got a bit of a problem. So all those things in terms of school systems and structures have to be quite strident, and we are focused on that. But all the things I've spoken to you, Michael, at the moment have been, in a way, put them in a box. They are absolutely critical, they're very important, but they're far from the whole story. The whole story is about having a holistic approach to a child. And by that I mean, children aren't to us little brains with bodies surrounding them that come in to absorb knowledge and to put it down on an exam paper. There's more to it than that. They are young human beings that have to develop in every way, physically, emotionally, their maturity must develop. And we have that, we're charged with that responsibility too. So by all means, look at the data. We're proud to look at the data, but look at what else we do with our young people. We nurture them, we give them a family environment. Sometimes we have to tell them off, but mostly we praise them. We're proud of them, even though growing up isn't always straightforward, and you do have, as you do with your own children, ups and downs. That's fine, but we by and large see them through. This is a really caring environment, and I think that was probably what Robert was focusing on, saying that there was a focus in the school. Yes, there is. The focus is on pastoral. It's looking after those young people. What we want for them is to leave here with brilliant exam results, but more than that, we want confident young people who understand what being a citizen in 2008 really means.
And the school's speciality, humanities, was that something that was chosen or was it foisted upon you?
We chose it. Now, there's a great choice. There are so many things you can choose, but you have to ask the question initially, what matters to us? What do we need to develop? What do we need to be very strong in? And how is it going to best benefit the school, i.e. the students, and the whole community? Because having a specialism actually means working with the community. Humanities, we start off with English. It's the key subject for us because everything depends on English. It could be, for example, that you may be a fabulous mathematician, you may be a great physicist. As a child you always had those skills in science and maths, but your English you're not very confident on. Yesteryear that was fine, it's not now. For a start, you're going to find it hard with the type of exam papers that students have to sit now to cope with any subject unless you've got a reasonably good level of English. But it's also fundamental in terms of survival. And in terms of the community that we're serving, there are issues. 1 in 4 of our adult population has issues, well, essentially they're functionally illiterate. So we can't ignore that because that has got an impact. We're not an island, that impacts on the school. We have to react to that positively, and that's the way we're doing it. We're picking on English and we're going to make it, keep it, we already have made it a focus, we're going to keep it a very significant focus and make sure that we move on with that steadily. And just like with the exam progress and the progress we've made there, it has to be in a very measured, calculated way. You've got to know where you're starting and you've got to know your target at the end.
And over the next 5 years, what about the building here? Have you any hopes for the improvements in the building?
We have got exceptionally high hopes. At the moment we're talking about little acorns. I'm hoping that in 3 years' time you're going to see the most beautiful oak trees ever in this Purfleet Averley area. This school is not going to be here forever. It's the substance of it isn't solid, so we recognise that we have to move on. But how do we move on? We could design a nice little school that's got lovely, 19th century style corridors and English, maths there, French there, Spanish there. It doesn't work like that anymore. There's more is needed in this community. Take away the fact that this school needs to be rebuilt and look at the need for regeneration in this community, especially between Purfleet and Averley. These are communities that have had very little in the way of investment. They need more than a decent school, one that's really attractive to look at, that takes away from what I would consider the architectural sadness in the area and gives people here something to be proud of. But they need more. They need facilities, they need services, they need healthcare, they need social services, they need all the things that would make a community successful somewhere in between the two communities. So think bigger than a school, think bigger than rebuilding a school, think about rebuilding a community, because when we get the community regeneration, the school too will benefit, and vice versa. As the school benefits, the community will benefit. The two are very, very closely linked.
And finally, in all the interviews with the heads at schools in Thurrock, it's not a one-person show, is it?
No, no. Far from it. I work very well with the other heads in the authority, primary and secondary. My secondary colleague, who's the principal of the Gateway Academy, and I work very closely. We look at each other's schools. Mr. Sadler's gone through a period of development with his academy that perhaps we could follow in many ways in terms of building development, certainly. That collaboration is essential. The system has been set up where everyone needs to get the best results to attract pupils so the school doesn't close. Very competitive. Nothing much wrong with that. That happens in all walks of life. But you can't just be competitive. You do need to be collaborative. And really by that I mean there are heads out there who know an awful lot about certain things I don't know about. I've learnt lessons that I can help them with. Supporting each other is absolutely critical. And that's happening in Thurrock. I'm really proud of my secondary colleagues.